Good afternoon, everybody. One of the major themes in American history is the movement to the West. And one of the great expeditions toward the West was that of Lewis and Clark in 1804 to 1806. And it was on this date, September 23, 1806, that they finished their 8,000-mile journey when they returned to St. Louis. When Thomas Jefferson purchased the Louisiana Purchase from the French, he was provided with a great opportunity. And Jefferson, being a curious guy, decided an expedition to check it out would be just the thing. So he lined up his secretary, Meriwether Lewis, on the left, and an Army captain, William Clark, on the right, to lead a group of men who they called the Corps of Discovery up the Missouri. So they had a keel boat built in Pittsburgh and floated down the Ohio. This is what we think it looks like. They got their crew together, and in 1804 they took off. And they kept a very thorough diary of their trip. So we know what they did every day, and it's a great historical resource. And one of the things about it, it had observations of things that were brand new to people like Lewis and Clark. So the idea was to go up the Missouri River, hoping to find a water route to the Pacific. So upstream they went. And when they came to North Dakota in 1804, they settled with some Mandan Indians, called it Fort Mandan, and wintered there, 1804 to 1805. And it was at Fort Mandan they met Sacagawea, who was married to a French trapper. And Sacagawea became their guide and a great American in history. They spent a lot of time in Montana, and if you go to Montana, you'll see lots of Lewis and Clark signs. As they were making their way on their trip, they came across huge herds of buffalo. This was quite striking. They also saw grizzly bears. They had never seen bears that large before. So as they keep on keeping on, they see the Rockies out in the distance. And as they're going up the Missouri, eventually they hear this big sound. And they finally come to Great Falls, Montana, which is dammed now, but then was one big cascade, and they actually heard it days away. Well, eventually they came to where the Missouri River began, the Jefferson River, named after the president, the Madison River, named after the Secretary of State, and the Gallatin River, named after the Secretary of the Treasury. And they realized what we know today is they had come to the peak. That would be the Continental Divide. So they crossed the Continental Divide, went into the Bitterroot Mountains, pictured here. These are very steep, very cold, very snowy. They almost didn't make it, but they did. They stumbled out of the mountains and came to Weippe, Idaho, where they met some Nez Perce Indians. So Dorothy and I checked out Weippe once. It's not much of a place, but it's here that one of the fateful encounters happened. And that is where the Nez Perce Indians helped Lewis and Clark. And here's a sign. And you see these signs all over the Lewis and Clark Trail. But what if the Indians hadn't helped them? But they did. And they were able to carry on. They saw the Cascade Range. Here's Mount Hood, which is outside of Portland, Oregon. Eventually they came to the Pacific. They wintered at Fort Clatsop in 1805, 1806. It was rainy and chilly, but they finally left and headed back. When they got to the mountains, Clark went south along the Yellowstone. Lewis stayed on the Missouri. And while along the Yellowstone, Clark noticed this rock formation of sandstone. He went to check it out and decided this would be a good place to write his name, William Clark, 1806. And you can visit it today. It's run by the National Park Service. You climb up these steps and you can see Clark's name, and other people have put their name in there too. But it's one of the few archaeological proofs of their trip. They finally came back to St. Louis on our date, September 23, 1806. 2 years, 4 months, and 8,000 miles later. And I recommend this book by Stephen Ambrose. It's just great and gives you a great overview of their trip.